Be featured on ILTV and show the world what you have to offer. We broadcast from Israel to around the globe, so get yourself camera ready.
Hello and welcome to ILTV's Israel Daily. I'm Aaron Porras, and coming up in today's newscast, major cause for celebration. Nigeria finally releasing the 3 Israelis that they've been illegally detaining for nearly 3 weeks. And ILTV heading to the airport this morning to meet up with Rudy Ruckman, E. David Benaim, and Andrew Noam Liebman upon their arrival. Meanwhile, investigations beginning in the north. The Nature and Parks Authority searching for the culprit or culprits behind a disastrous case of poisoning. And finally, an incredible showing of faith, love, and cross-border cooperation. 3 families from Israel and the United Arab Emirates entering into a precedent-setting organ swap agreement. Now we begin with the news that we've all been waiting for. Israel activist Rudy Ruckman, French-Israeli journalist David Benaim, and filmmaker Andrew Noam Liebman finally released from prison in Nigeria, where they've been held without charge for 20 days. ILTV meeting with the 3 upon their arrival in Israel for an incredible and exclusive extended interview.
We can't speak, we can't talk, we can't go to anywhere. We're really locked somewhere, and we're just looking at ourselves. I can't tell you how many times me and Noam looked at ourselves like, how are we here? Like, how did this happen? You know, we're like behind bars and we're just looking outside like, how did we even get here?
A whirlwind end to a very long month for 3 Israelis. The filmmaking team behind a new documentary entitled We Were Never Lost finally touching back down in Tel Aviv after 3 weeks of illegally being detained in Nigeria, the first of many locations in their project. How does it feel to be back?
I mean, always when you come to Israel, it's all of a sudden that you can come and breathe. For me, when I'm out of Israel, it's like I'm holding my breath. And finally I come to Israel and I can breathe again. But additional, on top of the usual experience when you're coming home, we just went through 3 weeks in a cage, locked up, for no reason. We did nothing wrong. We just came there to show the stories of the Jewish life in Nigeria, the Igbos. And although we weren't able to do our full project, we're still not going to stop, and we're still going to show their stories and showcase so that they get recognition and people understand who they are. But obviously we're very tired and very happy to be back home.
Yeah, it's amazing to be home. It never felt that amazing to say that we are back home in Israel. For somebody that just met Aliyah a few years ago, it has a lot more sense. But we feel great. We are very thankful about all the people that really worked tirelessly to help us being back home today after 19 days of captivity, 20 days I think we would say for the full period. But yeah, it's amazing to be back home.
Israel activist Rudy Ruckman, French-Israeli journalist David Benaim, and filmmaker Andrew Noam Liebman arrested Friday morning from their hotel room under false pretenses, and just 2 days after arriving in Nigeria, their conditions described as inhumane.
They just said, you know, you have to come downstairs, there's police downstairs. So we were just getting our stuff ready, our bags weren't even yet closed. We go downstairs and all these men with guns, actually it's ironic, they had Tavors, Israeli guns, and they had black ski masks, and their chief, who's named Casey, comes and says, don't worry, everything's good, you're invited, you're not arrested, you're just coming for a quick little interview and everything's gonna be done within 30 minutes. And, you know, for us, you know, we didn't want to cause any problems, so we went and, you know, we found ourselves for 20 days locked up.
I want to add quick that, you know, when we initially were taken in, we were very calm because we understood that there was a miscommunication that happened. And coming from Israel, we can understand if a country is going to take their national security seriously. But we figured once we go in, explain our story, show them our footage, it's going to be cleared up very quickly. And that's when we didn't get any information. They just continued to hold us there. After the investigation finished, we were just continually held with no reason, with no understanding of what was going on.
But in terms of the inhumane conditions, I mean, I can tell you we were put into a cage that was like a round room that you can maybe take 3-4 steps in each direction. That's how small it was. We slept on the floor. There were like bottles of urine from previous inmates that had left there that couldn't go to the bathroom. There was no AC for the majority of the time. Mosquitoes, bugs everywhere. There was no light. We were just in the dark, in heat, sweating on the floor, and this is how we would sleep. And they would keep us there until they would want to ask us questions. And we complied with everything. We answered all their questions. We even provided them with our actual footage to show them. We're not here to do anything political, anything controversial. To the contrary, we want to show a positive image of Nigeria. This is going to show more of a different side that hasn't been told.
Of course, the trio tried protests of their own as well. when the DSS continued to refuse them any information.
At no point were we actually even arrested. Like they didn't tell us they were accused of something. They didn't tell us you're officially arrested of something. And their status of invited is what allows them to not allow us to have a lawyer, not allow us to have a phone call, not allow us to have any rights because we're there at our own will. But several times we try to say, okay, so if we're here at our will, then let us go. And they said, no, if you go, then we'll stop you. And we tried a few times, and they again jumped on us and threw us back into the cage. There's actually one time that me and Noam put our tefillin on and just walked out to the lobby and started like saying, we're innocent, let us out. We made a scene for all the people there, even civilians that were walking into their headquarters. And 10 people came on us, threw us back into the elevator and threw us back into the cage. So we really tried to do everything to get out. But I didn't have my phone the whole time. I didn't have a phone call the whole time. I didn't speak to my family. I didn't speak to anybody. So, the first 5 days were the hardest because we didn't even know if people knew about us. We didn't even know if people knew we were gone. We didn't know what was going on. It was just one moment where we're there with the community. The night before, we were really like having a sort of meeting with everyone. We're talking or going up like late and discussing. And then the next morning, all of a sudden, we find ourselves in prison.
Thankfully, between the United States, Israeli and French embassies, the families of the captives, and the local Jewish Chabad chapter, which acted as a liaison and provided the boys with kosher food, they weren't left in the dark for too long. Meantime, while the DSS largely refusing to provide details, there are speculations as to what exactly caused this tragic miscommunication.
Well, the thing is, there's a movement in Nigeria trying to free the South that's what they call it Biafra. There was actually a civil war back in the 60s and they failed, and so a large portion of the Nigerian population are called Igbos, and prior to the British, they were actually separate. They were their own people, and the British kind of united different ethnic groups and created a country called Nigeria. Now, there are different movements within Nigeria trying to separate and create their own autonomous regions, and these Igbos, a lot of them identify as being Jewish, and there is a state for the Jewish people, it's Israel, so some of those people also wave Israel flags, and when they do certain protests and talk about freeing their country and their land, which again we have nothing to do with, they associate that to Israel. So all of a sudden you have Israelis coming saying that they want to do a documentary on the Igbos. For us, it was documenting Jewish life experiences, culture, aspirations. And then you have some bloggers saying, oh, finally Israel's here to help us to free Biafra and all sorts of things that, obviously were not true. And the government comes and out of nowhere just takes us away. But I think they knew from the very beginning that we had nothing to do with that. It's very clear. We had made public posts that we had nothing to do with these extremist things. I mean, what our project was doing has been live and public for a year. And we've kind of got the experience in Nigeria that everything takes very, very long. Very, very slow. And it just so happens that everything on Friday morning, very early in the morning, we were taken and, things happened very quickly. So in our opinion, it was an attempt to silence the voices and the stories of the Igbos.
One thing that I don't know if we touched on, and it's that with the articles that were being shared upon our arrival, when people used our images, they completely fabricated a story. They said that the leader of this movement had prophesied that when a Sefer Torah arrives in Nigeria, that'll be like the revival of their movement, when in reality there's already, to my knowledge, at least a dozen Sefer Torot in Nigeria. So they basically saw what we were doing and said, oh, we prophesized this, and created this fake narrative, and the government bought the narrative, and even when we presented them with all the evidence and they couldn't find anything to hold us, it still continued on.
Now that we've been out for a few hours, we've seen how much false information were spread. We were taken because of false information being spread. So before you share anything out there, be careful. Make sure that you get the information right. And we were for real collateral damage of fake news. So at some point, make sure that even during captivity, we had so many things. People said so many false information. So please be careful. Don't spread any false information.
Again, though, as the three continuously maintained, their true mission has never been political, with the aim being to expose the lives of remote Jewish communities. And this ordeal has not deterred them at all.
So when I joined the army, I learned the hard way in Israel, that no means try harder. So the fact that they put us in a prison cell, in a cage for 20 days is not going to push us backwards. It's only going to push us forward. We're going to take this energy, we're going to take what we went through, and we're going to go make something out of it. We're going to continue in different countries, Madagascar, Uganda, Zimbabwe, Tanzania, Ethiopia. Those are the rest of the countries we need to go in Africa. Maybe, we'll be able to go to Nigeria. We always have hopes, but it looks like for the time being we won't be able to.
Then finally, while the first leg of the documentary may have come to a close, the mission in Nigeria is far from over. The filmmakers expressing high hopes to return and finish what they started one day, but more importantly, there's actually still one more captive left to be released.
Mother of many children, many of them that we met, that we spent time with, beautiful souls, beautiful people. She's not just the mother of children, she's also basically a mother for the whole community. She's one of the leaders there. She took us in, she hosted us, she gave us food, she said, whatever you need, I'll be there for you. She took us to see an Igbo king. We were supposed to do a ceremony. She bought me like a whole Igbo gown, and she's really the caretaker for this community and the rock and the glue that keeps them all together. Unfortunately, when we were taken, she was taken along with us. She was with us for the first 24 hours when we were still in Anambra State. When we were taken to Abuja, she was taken with us in the car ride, and as soon as we got there, they separated us from her. Now, every single time that we received food from Chabad, we separated a third of that food or a fourth of that food. And when we were 3, when we were 2, we did a third, and we gave her that, and we made sure that the DSS officers gave her the food so that she can eat, because she's a Jewish woman and she also needs to eat. When we were released, we spoke with Chabad to make sure that they would continue to provide them food and to continue allowing her to be able to be fed, because the conditions there are just horrible, and we can go more in depth at that later time. But yeah, I saw her one time while we were there, because they keep women in a different building. She was on her way to go see the doctor. I rushed, gave her a hug, asked her if she's okay. She said, I'm okay, but I'm not feeling too well, so I'm going to see the doctor. And since then, we haven't been able to see her, but we've constantly asked the DSS officers, how is she, how is she, how is she? But we can't believe anything that they tell us. So, we really don't know her situation now. So we really want to, now that we're free, not that, it should have been us first and her next, but the reality is that we were free first. She's still there. She's still in their custody. She's still being detained for no reason. And we'd like to spread awareness of her story and the importance of who she is for the community, and for her to be freed as well, to go back to her family.
To learn more about We Were Never Lost, as well as the filmmakers and their unlawful captivity in Nigeria, head to ILTV.tv or to ILTV's Facebook and YouTube channels. This is Aaron Porras reporting, ILTV. Horrible scenes reported across the Upper Galilee this week. At least 24 wild animals, including several endangered species, found dead from internal injuries, and leading the Nature and Parks Authority to investigate. And it seems that someone is allegedly intentionally poisoning these creatures with the use of illegal pesticides. In any case, here to discuss is Ohad Hatzufeh, avian ecologist with the Israel Nature and Parks Authority. Ohad, thank you so much for being with us. Now, what pesticide did you detect, and how widespread is it?
Well, yet it has to be analyzed in the lab, but according to what we found in the field, from the package and the way it was used, we are quite sure that this is organophosphor or aldicarb, carbamat. It's the group of poisons that unfortunately killing wildlife, and especially birds of prey and vultures in particular, all over the world. And usually when it is used legally, it is an important way to control pest species, mainly invertebrates, but it can be used illegally, and then it has a severe effect on the environment.
So is the poisoning ongoing? Are animals still turning up dead across the region?
Yes, this is an ongoing problem that we tackle, I guess, not only in Israel. Israel is not better or worse than other countries. It's a global issue of illegal use of pesticides. In Israel in particular, we lost in the last decade our griffon vulture population in the Golan Heights because of illegal use of these pesticides. And from now and then we find, on a daily basis, we find predators as jackals and foxes, or even dogs, whether feral or someone's dog that were lost. And it's happening quite often, too often, unfortunately. And we're trying to fight this, but obviously not with a good success.
So it's suspected that this is intentional. Why would somebody do this? And what are the injuries, actually?
Well, the injuries are fatal, dead animals. And it is used, most of the poisonings, at least in Israel, unlike some other places, are against, as I said, predators, mainly jackals. Sometimes it's against wolves or dogs even. and it's very commonly and widespread. So no one intentionally killed vultures, or in this case, it was a white-tailed seagull, a quarter of the Israeli population, one bird. It's a species that already extinct due to poisonings in 1957, and we successfully reintroduced it. And this one is an offspring that was born in the wild, but because they are eating carcasses, sometimes it's the bait itself. Although this was not the target of the one which used it illegally, still it's killing birds of prey. So no one intentionally is killing birds of prey, but they are the number one casualties, or those that cannot, let's say, re-establish the population or population increase after those poisonings. This is completely fatal for the wild population of the species.
All right. Ohad, thank you so much for your insights.
Thank you for having me.
Moving on now back to the Abraham Accords, the regional peace agreement between Israel, the United Arab Emirates, and Bahrain, expanding this week to new heights, with Israelis and Emiratis trading not just in business, but in organs. In the first ever organ exchange of this kind between Israel and an Arab state, 3 families, 2 in Israel and 1 in Abu Dhabi, receiving life-saving kidney transplants, the organs procured by the patient's loved ones who donated their own healthy parts to others in need. But with an odd number of recipients, the swap is less direct. Rather, it seems that a sort of game of musical organs was actually played, a swap that doctors call cross-couple transplantation. Basically, each patient in need would get a kidney in return for one of their family members donating their own kidney to a stranger, the system being necessary as none of the families could provide a suitable organ on their own. So at 5:30 Wednesday morning, doctors at Sheba Medical removed a kidney from 39-year-old Shani Markowitz, the kidney being flown then to Abu Dhabi. Meantime, the Abu Dhabi recipient's daughter donated her kidney for an Israeli woman in Haifa's Rambam hospital. Then that woman's husband is donating his kidney to Shani Markowitz's mother. And with that, the cycle is complete. Most exciting about this arrangement, however, is that it sets an incredible precedent for future transplant swaps. Speaking with the Times of Israel, Dr. Rafi Beyer, who chairs the Israel Center for Organ Transplantation, says, quote, "It's the first time that we've conducted such a process between Israel and an Arab state, and it really shows that medicine has no borders." And now it's time for our daily update on the 2020-2021 Summer Olympic Games, where we cover the latest surrounding Israel's Olympic team in Tokyo, Japan. And of course, back to discuss is ILTV's Chana Rifkin. Chana, it's good to have you.
Good to be back, Aaron.
All right, now, Chana, unfortunately, I understand that we have some more disappointing losses. We still only have 1 medal as far as I'm aware, with Israeli judoka Peter Palchik losing to Japan's Adam Wolf, and then again later in the day to Canada's Shadi El Nahas in the 100-kilogram weight class. Palchik's coach seemed pretty frustrated when scolding him after the match as well. How big of a loss is this?
Look, it's a setback, of course. Palchik was a favorite, but we do still have 2 judokas in the running with matches tomorrow. Or Sasson and Raz Hershko.
All right, so Israel can still pull something together in judo. Now, transitioning into a sport that we haven't actually touched on yet, windsurfing. And Israel was having some progress, but yesterday it looks like it wasn't a great day for any of the Team Israel windsurfers, specifically Yoav Cohen and Katie Spichakova.
Yes, and though landing himself in 6th place, Cohen lost the chance of winning any medals. But after the loss, he told Israeli sports media, quote, "God forbid the kids at home in Israel will not think that because they sometimes lose, then it's better to avoid sports."
Yeah, it's a very important message. Failure doesn't necessarily mean you should quit. And, it's a good example set by an athlete for all the kids watching, of course.
Exactly. Someone who can handle defeat and get back up again, even stronger and better than before. It's all about loving the sport and staying committed to your goal. Now, Katie Spichakova was also doing really impressively, but unfortunately lost her chance for a medal as well.
All right, well, Israel's baseball team also running Olympic bases for the first time today.
That's right, Aaron. Today was their debut game at the Olympics this year.
I'm actually really hyped for this. I know we spoke to the coach yesterday. It's a big accomplishment for Israel, medal or no medal. And so I'm very excited. Chana, is there anything else?
No, thanks for having me back, Aaron, and I will be back next week for updates.
All right, can't wait. Chana, thank you so much. We'll have more Olympic updates, as you've said, next week, so everybody at home, stay tuned. And now shifting gears to a more refreshing topic, wine. Israel's #1 wine exporter to the United States, the Israel Wine Producers Association, or IWPA, currently hosting top American sommeliers and wine journalists for an incredible tour. The group traveling Israel top to bottom for a sampling of some of the richest flavors in the nation. But with us now to tell us more are the heads of the tour, Josh Greenstein, Executive Vice President of the IWPA, and Eric Siegelbaum, founder of Sommelier Consulting LLC and one of Food and Wine Magazine's 2019 Sommeliers of the Year. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, how are you?
Hi, hello.
All right, now tell us about this trip. How was it born and what spots are you hitting?
Well, it was born from, running around the U.S. and tasting wines with people all over. And there's really nothing than bringing them here and letting them taste the wines live with the people that made it and they're listening to their great stories firsthand.
So what is the biggest misconception about Israeli wine, do you think?
American consumers don't understand how to separate the idea of kosher from Israel and the idea of kosher from sweet Kiddush wine. So to have people come here and understand the depth and breadth of what Israel can produce and let them know that it's not just wine for Kiddush and sweet low alcohol wine, it's absolutely fantastic. But yeah, biggest misconception around is definitely that.
So many of your sommeliers are visiting Israel for the first time. What's it been like for them?
Yeah, just seeing their face and seeing their expressions from what they thought were going to happen to where they are now, and touching the land and walking around and tasting the wines, it's just been amazing.
Absolutely. I mean, these are sommeliers and journalists that have been on dozens of wine trips. They've been to regions all over the world. But to see the connection that they have with Israel, with the land, with the culture, with the history and the modernity of Israel is just, there's nothing like it.
So what separates Israeli wine from its global competitors?
I mean, we are the oldest wine producing region in the world, at least one of. And to understand that wine has been made here since biblical times and that they can taste the history of ancient wines, the more recent history, and then the future of not just Israel, but the world of wine production is absolutely incredible. No other country can do that like Israel can.
So Eric, following up with you, will you be incorporating any Israeli wines in your next sommelier recommendations list?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I already do. I'm very passionate about Israeli wine. But being here for me is, having been to Israel many times, I'm still learning, I'm still experiencing and discovering, and you can be sure I'm going to translate that discovery into my recommendations.
All right, thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
Absolutely, thank you. L'chaim.
All right, and finally, before we go, it's time to learn some Hebrew with the latest of our limited weekly lessons from our friends at Ulpanor.
שלום, אני רוצה קפה, בבקשה.
את רוצה קפוצ'ינו, אספרסו, קפה טורקי?
אני רוצה אמריקנו, בבקשה.
אוקיי. עם חלב?
לא, תודה. אבל עם הרבה סוכר.
בבקשה.
תודה. כמה זה?
8 שקלים.
תודה רבה.
בבקשה.
Now let's take a look at the weather forecast with Chana Rifkin.
Thank you, Aaron. So our viewers can look forward to a sunny weekend with tonight's lows ranging between 22 to 27 degrees Celsius. Then, for this weekend, highs in the 30s in the northern and central regions and lower 40s in the south. And remember to take all the precautions needed to stay safe in Israel's July heat. Have a fabulous weekend, and now back to the studio.
All right, that is it for today's news. Today's exchange rate is 3.25 shekels to the American dollar and 2.6 shekels to the Canadian dollar. Finally, for the latest updates and news from ILTV, please like ILTV on Facebook, follow us on Instagram, and subscribe to our YouTube channel as well as to our newsletter at iltv.tv. I'm Aaron Porras. Be well. Thank you so much for watching.